For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreams. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's bread, and we are our grandfather's dreams. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's bread, and we are our grandfather's dreams. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to virtual worship at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Silver Spring. I'm Bruce McConaughey, today's worship associate, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. Whether this is your first time joining us for virtual worship or your 51st, I'm glad you're here. Joanne Kim is our welcoming captain for this morning and would be glad to answer your questions in the chat. Joanne will also be available during virtual coffee hour after the service is over. It's good to be together this morning, to sing, to share, and to reflect on that which is most important to our lives. I'm especially pleased to introduce you to Reverend Alexa Fraser, our guest preacher this morning. Rev. Fraser is a longtime member of this congregation and is happy to be preaching again at UUCSS. She currently serves the UU Fellowship of Poughkeepsie, New York as an interim and is the pastoral care minister at the Acatee Unitarian Universalist Church. In addition to her commitment to parish ministry, she has worked in hospital and palliative care settings to build her chaplaincy skills. She is certified in spiritual direction and as a grief recovery method specialist. Many of you know that her life partner is Ken Yobst, and their son Nathan Fraser grew up in our beloved congregation. We're thrilled to have Reverend Alexa in our virtual pulpit for the live broadcast of this service, so please join me in giving her a warm welcome in our chat. Alexa also let me know that the reminder note she sees every day on her desk proclaims, "Every grandmother is your grandmother, and every mother's son is your son." With that in mind, I welcome all the mothers, the grandmothers, and other family members who wish to celebrate Mother's Day today. All the best to you on this national holiday. If you are watching live, you can log into Google to participate in the chat in real time. This is a part of how we connect with one another during these services. Comments won't be available for later playback, but during the service they are very public, so please keep that in mind. Also, the live chat has some safety features to prevent disruptive comments, so you won't be able to post special characters or complete web addresses. American Sign Language interpretation is available in a Zoom room for those of you who wish to use it. If you need help finding that link, please ask in the chat or email vstechsupport@uucss.org. In a few minutes, everyone will be invited to light our flaming chalices. So now's a good time to get a chalice, a candle, or even a flashlight so you can join in kindling the flame of our community. But first, let's take a moment to say thank you to all of those who made today's service possible. Please join me in the words on your screen as we light our chalices and reaffirm our congregational commitment. May this light warm our hearts with love and caring and guide us in the ways of truth. As we gather here for worship, we pledge ourselves to the endless search for truth, to the right of each to believe as mind, heart, and conscience dictate, to accept the responsibilities this freedom commands, and to implement our belief in the essential worth and dignity of every human being. May it be so. Now let's join together in singing. The words to the song will appear on your screen.
Since what we choose is what we are, and what we love we yet shall be, the goal may ever shine afar, the will to reach it makes us free.
It is so good to be with you. As many of you know, I came up in this congregation, and in many ways, it is my forever home. Today's invocation is by Reverend Gretchen Haley. It begins now in the imagination. It starts here, in this moment, in this breath. You feel rising in your chest, the beat guiding, building between us, the healing, the hunger, the hope, the courage, the calling, the commitment. The drawing out of a new day, it begins now in the imagination, in this story we weave together, this song we sing, this prayer we bring into being from our hearts to our lips, from our hands to our life. Our shared life, it starts here with praise and thanksgiving, forgiveness, and this humble, centering confession that we could be wrong. This promise that we make to keep learning, to keep trying, to keep our sense of humor, to keep close this knowledge that we are all in this together. Come, let us begin. Let us worship together.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
In a moment, all worshiping with us live will be invited to type those joys and sorrows you wish to share into the chat box during the music. Please keep in mind that everything you share will be public during the live broadcast. If you're having a hard time and want extra support, please send an email to layministers, plural, at uucss.org, and either they or Reverend Kristen will be in touch. One of my favorite things about this congregation is that you truly believe and act as if you don't have to be a lay minister to practice the ministry of love and care for others. So feel free to make a note of anyone you'd like to send some support this week. If you're watching the recording of this service later, I invite you to hold yourself and all of your joys and sorrows tenderly, and hold in loving kindness all those in your life and the world who are suffering, who are in need, who need justice. Let us now open our hearts to the joys and sorrows that this gathered community has to share. Mickey Scott Bay Jones calls herself a justice doula, a person who helps bring justice to birth. Many of us here at UUCSS have attended and enjoyed the Revolutionary Love Conference, which recently happened by Zoom. Ms. Jones is a regular speaker at Revolutionary Love. Invitation to brave space. Together, we will create brave space because there is no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. Our 7 current principles are, I bet, well known to you. First, let me talk about that little preamble up front. We, the member congregations of the UUA, covenant to affirm and promote. That statement is at the top of the list of the 7 current principles. And while it is often left out of posters, bookmarks, that sort of things, it's important because these are values, purposes, and principles, which our denominations, member congregations, covenant to affirm and promote. The heart of our congregational polity is wrapped up in that introductory clause that declares that the purpose of the Association of Congregations is actually to uphold the principles. It is in our denominational bylaws, Article 2, Section C 2.1. These aren't personal statements. They aren't "we believe," though many of us do believe them and hold them close. They aren't a congregation or personal creed, which is what I believe. Rather, these are principles are about congregations and covenant, not individuals and beliefs. The principles are aspirations we covenant to live into as congregations. They are a covenantal statement of what I choose to create with y'all. The principles are a statement of the world we are actively choosing to build together. The principles call us to spiritual growth, not to belief. Having said something about the context or setting for those conventional covenantal 7 principles, let me read them to you and talk about them a bit. Principle 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. I know plenty of people who think that this does it. One and done. With the first principle, we've got our covenantal agreement. If we all really behaved like each person was worthy, we'd be there. Beloved community. And yes, our world and our denomination is strengthened when the loving statement that affirms the inherent worth and dignity of every person is proclaimed. But no, that isn't the whole agreement, promise, covenant we want our congregations to make to our association and among themselves. Again, we have that contextualizing statement here on this slide, because that covers the whole group of 7 principles. We, the member congregations of the UUA, covenant to affirm and promote. 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. And 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part.
return to the home of your soul.
As a group of principles, 2 through 7 elaborate on and reinforce the wisdom in the first principle. The principles call on us to covenant to work towards justice and equality and accept one another. These principles talk about the importance of truth and how we should conduct a responsible search for truth, and the importance of the democratic process in the fellowship and our larger community. They remind us of the larger world and the common goal of peace and the interconnected web of all existence. And all that doubles back to the third principle happening in the context of spiritual growth. Let me say it again, spiritual growth. Those are the existing 7 principles. They were crafted in a spirit of honest inquiry, and it is likely they will change again. But for now, they are the 7. When they are changed with newer words and better understandings of our deeper commitments to each other, then we can focus on those new words. Unitarian Universalism has a long and pretty spotty history with regard to being a broadly welcoming multiracial denomination. We don't have time to go into the long and often very painful history here, but let me touch on a few points. Through the 1960s, and in many cases after that, Black applicants for Unitarian or Universalist or UU ministry were discouraged or even refused admission to our seminaries and ministerial fellowship. Remember, this is a historic problem going back, way back. Similar rejections happened when congregants or ministers tried to open churches or fellowships in predominantly Black neighborhoods. In the civil rights time, our denominational leadership did not fulfill an important promise to our Black leaders. And indeed, that controversy is worthy of its own sermon, and it led to a racial rupture in our denomination. Throughout our history, people of color have been told explicitly or implicitly that the church down the way is for people like you. Many members of this congregations pushed people of color away from attendance, membership, and leadership in our denomination. Yes, many UUs worked hard during the civil rights era, and yes, there is a proud and important history here. But we neglected to look at our own congregational and denominational behaviors towards people of color who applied for jobs or in other ways wanted to be and would have been great leaders. Black Lives of UU, or BLUE as it is often called, was created by Black UUs, mostly queer Black UU women, in 2015 to support each other and to educate white people in this denomination. And all that led to the 2017 Blue-led teach-ins at many of our congregations. These were teach-ins about racism and white supremacy culture. One of the core messages of the teach-ins was that white supremacy as a set of institutional assumptions and practices often operates unconsciously and tends to benefit white people and exclude people of color. Actual white supremacists are not required in order to uphold white supremacist culture. Building a faith full of people who understand that key distinction is essential as we work towards a more just society. Another core message of the teach-ins was that we need to focus on the racism and white supremacy culture that sometimes, often, permeates our UU lives and work. So that gets us to Paula Cole-Jones, who has preached here, done consulting work here, and who many of us know and respect enormously. What drove Paula, a UU poet, lay leader, consultant, and staffer at the UUA, to craft the 8 principles? She said that after working with congregations on these issues for over 15 years, she realized that a person can believe that they are being a good UU and following the 7 principles without thinking about or dealing with racism and other oppressions at the systemic level. So she and others wrote and proposed the 8th principle as an addition to our other principles in the bylaws of our denomination, and frankly, in our hearts. That was a lot of history. It represents a lot of pain, primarily for our Black and Brown members, and struggle and learning for many of us. I'll also name that many of us felt pain over the realization of how we have impacted or explicitly treated the people of color in our congregations in less than loving ways. Personally, I've been changed by the events that led to the teach-ins and my study of the 8th principle. I think you can be too. Okay, and so here we are at principle number 8. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. Let's pull this apart for a second. First, that first clause is now going to look very familiar because this principle is being reviewed as a standalone entry into the principles. Paula repeated that contextual language, the part that says we, the member congregations, So let's take that out of the conversation. Once it's added to the principles, it won't be needed. Now we are left with journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. What are the key words here? Journeying toward. I'm in for a dedicated journey to achieve justice for all oppressions, starting with racism. Spiritual wholeness. The eighth principle is the beginning of action rather than the ultimate goal. Many people of color have been attracted by the values and potential of UUism, but their soul or spirits have been repeatedly wounded through actions like those I just said a second ago. Our third principle calls us to spiritual growth. Let's make our actions match our values. Let's be a UU movement that feeds our values. That would be spiritual wholeness. Working to build a beloved community, none of the other principles mentions love or beloved community. Beloved community embodies a time in which all people share in the promises and potential of free and equitable existence. Accountability. Did you ever notice that our existing 7 don't make us accountable? I want to be accountable and be held accountable. I want our faith to be accountable and be held accountable. Dismantle, another action word. Within Unitarian Universalism, our problem is not conscious, intentional white supremacy. But despite our best intentions, sometimes because we live in a racist, sexist, classist, heterosexist, ableist society, we are unconsciously perpetuating systems of oppression through our words and actions without an express commitment to accountably dismantle systems of oppression. The tendency is for the systems of oppression to be perpetuated. Racism and other oppressions. Well, why do we single out racism in the eighth principle? Can any of us doubt that in the USA racism stands out? Over just the last few days, just recently, we've lived through the breathless waiting for Derek Chauvin to be convicted and sentenced, while also seeing so many additional needless, agonizing deaths. Between the start of testimony in that trial and Officer Chauvin's conviction, 64 people died in the hands of law enforcement nationwide, Black and Latino members representing more than half of the dead. And last, ourselves and our institutions. Who is to answer the call to action, change, growth, and beloved community expressed in the eighth principle? Us and our institutions. Personally, I am up for all of that. When Carla Pole Jones preached here, she said this, which resonated with me deeply. Every time we challenge the structures that perpetuate injustice, we are saved. End quote. All are saved when we change the structures that perpetuate injustice. All of us are saved when we restore humanity to the world. In short, the new proposed principle is an answer to the question, how do we live our UU values more fully? As principles 2 through 7 elaborate on the first principle, the eighth principle specifies an important focus of the first 7 principles. This new principle fills a gap between our aspirations stated in the first 7 principles and the reality of what we need to do. Action words, journey, accountability, build, working, and more. Our spiritual awakening occurs by filling that gap with love. Paula spoke here about what congregations have accepted the eighth principle are saying about the change that came as a result of accepting it. I'm going to repeat just a bit of what she said to reinforce the message about what lies on the other side of approving the eighth principle for inclusion in the principles of this congregation. Here are a few statements from ministers on that. I've added them a bit for clarity. One minister said, people wish that UUism would come into its fullness of living its values, but it hasn't. The eighth principle is an important theological statement that brings in language of beloved community, urging us to accountability and action. To really implement the eighth principle, it must be owned by the congregation. Another minister said, if you want to attract people under 40, you should probably adopt the eighth principle. That is what people want to see in their lives. Another said, faith communities that will thrive in the new age after COVID are going to be anti-racist. It is like the world just woke up. The change has already happened, and we as congregations and a denomination have to catch up. Paula Cole-Jones also gave some quotes from people of color in congregations which have accepted this new principle. Again, I've edited a bit for clarity. These comments were an answer to the question, what difference has the eighth principle made for you? The eighth principle has made a huge difference. Until you start living it, everything else you were saying about the other 7 doesn't ring true. I know intuitively that I was loved by my congregation, but for them to adopt the eighth principle was a tangible expression of that love. Not only did they adopt the eighth principle, but they began immediately doing the work. It has given me a brand new congregation that I feel a part of and is my congregation. It has been magic for me. In short, those congregations that have accepted the eighth principle and done the work are much more welcoming and loving place, much closer to the beloved community that we all aspire to. So those who identify as white, the story I'm about to share is primarily for you. In a story, it goes something like this. A pig and a chicken are walking down the road. The chicken says, hey, pig, I was thinking we should open a restaurant. The pig replies, maybe. What would we call it? The chicken responded, how about ham and eggs? The pig thinks for a minute and says, no, thanks. I'd be committed, but you'd only be involved. What does it mean to be committed to implementing the eighth principle? Not involved with implementing it, but committed. The critical part of implementing this principle for all of us is figuring out what it really asks us. To me, the real asks embedded in a study of and vote for this principle is the determination that it will be central to all the work we do. It means that we're making a commitment for not just social justice, but membership, religious education, all of the groups to focus on anti-racism work. Everyone will be wondering and imagining how to be anew. The eighth principle is not a social justice project, but a potentially central to all we do. Okay, I'm winding up here, but let's talk briefly about the language of the eighth principle. As I said previously, Paula is a poet. I love her book, Encounters, Poems about Race, Ethnicity, and Identity. I'd encourage you to get it and enjoy it as much as I have. I believe the wording here is intentional, and some of us may find it a bit awkward. Lots of us are editors. By profession or inclination, lots of us want to speak to the exact wording of the principle. I bet many of you, more than we might imagine, have a red pencil tucked behind your ear right now and are just itching to pull it out and start editing. I've heard a lot of well-meaning people say, I like the idea of the eighth principle, but the principle is written poorly, or it doesn't match the cadence or structure of this other 7. Or maybe someone is a humanist who doesn't want the word spiritual wholeness included, or they want it simplified or expanded, or maybe it should talk about white racism or racism against a list of races, identities, or other characteristics. Maybe it should be expanded in some other way that I haven't even thought of. But this is language chosen by those impacted by racism. No one gets to edit out those truths in the name of clarity, grammar, or for any other reason. Can we all instead understand the essence of what is being asked and commit to it, not get caught up in the phraseology? Can we commit to the intent of the proposed principle and call to action that it invokes? As Reverend Rachel Hayes said to her congregation recently, the question is not how we will change the language of the principles, but how our principles change us. So how will the study of this principle, and I hope its acceptance in this fellowship, change you as a group and as individuals? For me, I can say that I believe, as psychologist and author Joan Boyarensko said, some tension is necessary for the soul to grow. I've put the tension of building this covenant and affirming to promote this principle to good use. I'm challenged as a result of my study, and I hope the same for you. Here is one last comment from a Black person at a congregation that is accepted and is working to fully implement the eighth principle. Hearing my daughter's voice centers it for me. We don't have another generation of children who are expendable. We come from a long lineage of heretics. What heresy are we called to now? What are we called to proclaim? Blessed be, Ashe, and Amen.
There's so much in this life we receive which we do nothing to earn. The beauty of nature, the inspiration of music, art, and drama, our very lives themselves. All of these things are gifts we receive. The Unitarian Universalist Church of Silver Spring is also a gift, founded and built by generations of people, some who live only in our memories. They created this community not only for themselves, but for all of us who receive its gifts of inspiration, learning, and service today. And now it's our turn to give what we each can to support this congregation and our community partners so that others can enjoy the gifts we have received in abundance. Sunday morning offerings are a part of what makes our ministries, programs, and mission possible. But most importantly, making an offering will allow you to practice generosity, to contribute to a community that can do more together than any of us can do alone. There are 3 ways you can make your financial gift to this congregation. The first is by downloading the Give Plus mobile app from Vanco to set up an account. The second way to give is by using your phone to text a message to 833-880-1363. And if the app or texting just don't work for you, the third way is to give by mailing a check directly to the church. All of the information you need for all 3 of these methods is on your screen now and will appear again toward the end of today's service. I hope you will join me in making an offering with gratitude for all of life's gifts and all that UUCSS means to you. The offering will now be given and received with joy.
People get ready, there's a train coming. Don't need no baggage, you just climb on board. Face all you need to keep those diesels running. And you don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. All aboard, get on board. 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 People get ready for the train to Jordan, picking up passengers coast to coast. Faith is king, it opens doors and portals, has hands for all among this loving host. There's a train coming down the track. People that ain't ready better step well back. This train's been running since time began. Running on the love of a fellow man. So people get ready train coming. Don't need a wait, you just climb on board. That's all you need to keep those Jesus love. And you don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. All aboard, all aboard, all aboard, all aboard. People get ready, yeah, 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 people get ready.
May the gifts we have given fuel the flame of our commitment, empower us to serve our mission, and give the life we share the shape of truth, love, and justice.
Morning. Thank you for being here today. My name is Colin Riggs, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Silver Spring. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Our church is not only the organization that puts together these services. We are a vibrant community of volunteers and staff, a member of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and a part of the global UU denomination. Visitors are especially welcome to our virtual coffee hour after the service to learn more about us. Today we have 2 announcements. Share your appreciation. Each and every person who has served UUCSS this year has helped turn the lemons handed to us by the pandemic into lemonade. It's time to share our appreciation. Next Sunday, May 16th, is Appreciation Sunday. We plan on recognizing just about everyone who has made this largely virtual year of connection possible. Whether it's an individual or committee or other group, please share your appreciation so we can include it in the service. However you plan to participate, we invite you to be creative, enthusiastic, and brief. All videos need to be 30 seconds or less, and all written submissions less than 100 words so we can include them all. Please send your submissions to Reverend Kristen at minister@uucss.org with Appreciation Sunday in the subject line by the end of the day today. The resolution to adopt the 8th principle will be put before the congregation at our meeting on June 13th. You can find the language of the resolution, responses to frequently asked questions, and information about the meeting process on the UUCSS website. Today, Pat Holsabosh is here to share her thoughts about a key element of the proposed 8th principle, dismantling racism and other oppressions. After the service, members of the 8th Principle Task Force will be available in a coffee hour breakout room for anyone who would like to talk more about the 8th Principle and the UUCSS resolution to adopt it. We give thanks for all of the activities that enrich and enliven our congregational life. For our last activity, please welcome Pat Holsabosh from the 8th Principle Task Force to speak to you about the idea in the 8th Principle of dismantling racism and other oppressions. For discussions, they will be available to talk with you about this idea after today's service. Ask for the 8th Principle Coffee Hour breakout room today when you log into the coffee hour on Zoom.
Good morning. My name is Pat Holsabosh. I'm a member of the Racial Justice Task Force of UUCSS. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. The proposed 8th principle says we are journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. I'm drawn to the word dismantle, which means take a structure to pieces. It's not enough to be against the structure, to ignore, resist, or even fight it. The 8th principle calls us to get in there with our hands, hearts, and minds to take the structure of racism to pieces. Audre Lorde, the illustrious Black lesbian writer, gives us further guidance on dismantling racism and other oppressions when she says, "For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. Temporary is not good enough. Genuine change is what we want and must have. We may not know exactly what tools we'll be using for this dismantling, but the eighth principles does give us some hints. For example, doing the everyday work of our congregation intentionally through the lens of anti-racism, living in the complexity of intersectionalities, building healthy and loving relationships with both an inward and outward focus. One thing I feel sure of is that using new tools will make us uncomfortable at times. Dismantling anything's a fierce process. Discomfort itself may be one of the new tools. But I'm confident that the UUCSS community can meet this challenge.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all these chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I could say. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole world to hear. Say 'em loud, say 'em clear, for the whole world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart. Remove all the bars that still keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree everyone should be free. Then you'd see and agree everyone should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things I can do. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I'd sing 'cause I know how it feels to be free. And I'd sing 'cause I know how it feels to be free.
Please join me in the words of our chalice extinguishing. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.
The benediction today is based on something I read by Reverend Sharon Welsh in her book, The Ethic of Risk. This moment calls for an ethic of risk, an ethic that begins with the recognition that we cannot guarantee decisive changes in the near future or even in our lifetime. The ethic of risk is propelled by the equally vital recognition that to stop resisting, even when success is unimaginable, is to die. The death that is experienced by those who turn from rage, who forego resistance, is nonetheless real. It is the death of the imagination, the death of caring, the death of the ability to love. For if we cease resisting, we lose the ability to imagine strategies or resistance and ways of sustaining each other in the long struggle for justice.
Break the silence all around the world. Break the silence in your neighborhood. Break the silence deep inside your heart. Break the silence now. When they tell you hush your mouth, break the silence. When they tell you don't speak out, break the silence. When they take away your books, break the silence. When your confidence is shook, break the silence. When they say don't trust each other, break the silence. When they say tell on your brother, break the silence. When they say give up the fight, break the silence. When you know about your rights, break the silence all around the world. Break the silence in your neighborhood. Break the silence deep inside your heart. Break the silence now.
When the few hold out to plenty,
Break the silence. When the many don't have any, break the silence.
when you say that you are wrong,
Break the silence. When you have to sing your song. Break the silence all around the world. Break the silence in your neighborhood. Break the silence deep inside your heart. Break the silence now. When they say your song is bad, break the silence.
when they take
Away your land, break the silence. When they say it's dangerous, break the silence. When you're just too curious, break the silence. When they say don't play your drum,